Welcome to the Victorious Souls podcast with me, your host, Danielle Burnock, that lady on the internet who loves you, from danielleburnock.com. Today with my guest, Wendy. And I forgot to ask you how to pronounce your name, Wendy. I've been had it on my notes and I don't want to mutilate it. So please pronounce your last name for us.
My last name is Zahorjanski.
Oh, I would have never said that. So
that's okay.
So I'm glad I had you pronounce your last name for us. So welcome to the show today. Wendy is an author, a cross-cultural worker, and she calls herself a novice gardener too. I hope we get to get into that a little bit too. Welcome to the show for today, Wendy. Thank you for being on my show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Well, before I jump into my first question, I actually do want to ask you, what is a novice gardener? Why do you call yourself a novice gardener?
Yeah, I have discovered that I really enjoy gardening, but I don't know how to garden, so I can't really call myself a gardener yet. But I actually am starting on a new venture this year of hosting a community garden on a piece of land that we own. So I have a friend who is an expert gardener. So she's going to help me to level up on my gardening skills. So that's a new thing for me. And that's why I put it in there, because it's going to be, I think, a bigger part of my life. I hope it will be.
Oh, cool. Because it's a very out of the ordinary kind of thing for someone to put in their bio. So I wanted to touch on that. I thought it had more meaning than just throwing that in at the end. So
yes.
Well, let's jump into your story. Let's start with your childhood. What was it like growing up? Your family,
sure,
siblings, whatever.
Sorry. I grew up in Arizona until I was 10. That's where my family lived. I have an older brother and an older sister. I'm the youngest. There's a bigger gap in between us. My brother's 5 years older. My sister's 9 years older. So, wow. So I was the mistake at the end. So that's how it happened. But anyway, I had a pretty typical childhood. I grew up in a Christian home. My mom and my dad were both believers until I was the age of 6, and things really changed when my dad was in a plane accident and was killed in a plane accident. Yeah. So
wow,
I
didn't know that part of your story. When you were 6, you lost your dad. Oh my goodness, that's horrible. I'm so sorry.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it definitely was obviously a very hard time for our family, and something that took, grief you always carry with you, but I think it took us a really long time to get back to our new normal. But during that time after he was killed, and because we had been living in Arizona because of his work, my mom is actually from the East Coast. So we made the move to Vermont so that we would be closer to her family when I was 10. Wow. So, so then that became a new beginning kind of. And that was the first time that I discovered that other people had lost a parent, or had a friend who went through divorce, some kind of grief or loss. And my friend's parents went through a divorce. And so that's the first time I think that was really healing for me, when I started talking to other people about their stories and started hearing kind of that common thread of loss. And obviously there's a lot of things I could talk about in that, but I think other than that event, my childhood was pretty typical in the sense that we went to church on Sundays. My mom is a believer. I always remember that our home was focused around the Christian values, and it was something that she lived out and not that she just spoke. So also for my brother and my sister, they're also believers. So that was a very strong foundation for me. So even when I was in high school and kind of was asking questions or having those kind of doubts, I really think that those things that were so a part of our home life and very integrated, I think pretty well, of course, not perfection, but pretty well, that really held me, because I would come back to a lot of scriptures that I had memorized when I was little, or things that the example that I saw through my mom or my older brother and sister that really kind of kept my faith more stable when I wasn't feeling so stable, if that makes sense. So
the support, because love mitigates trauma. So you had a good support system around you.
Yes.
And that was what held you all together. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So it's a wonderful point to bring out, because as part of a workshop I'm doing, I bring up how love mitigates trauma. Studies have
Wow.
shown that. And here you have
Mm,
shared in your very own story how that was true. You went through this,
yeah.
you moved to a different state, you lost your dad, completely
Mhm.
different place, yet you were so surrounded by that love that you're like, oh, it's pretty typical. And you're like, okay, fine. Where some
Yeah, it is.
people,
Yeah.
would be devastated. And there we have
Mhm.
how trauma is personal. Two people can go through the
Yes.
same thing and come out vastly different. So I'm
Yeah.
thankful for you that you had so much support around you.
Yes. Yeah, I am too. I think that I mean, I don't want to give the picture that we didn't struggle, because
Oh
for sure
no,
our family was,
everyone
yeah, like a
struggles. If
mess
you
and
go through
all those
loss, you
things.
struggle.
Yes. Yes. But I think even now that all three of us are adults that are healthy, I mean, yeah, healthy, and functioning and have our families, I think that we did have the support and the people around us who were really helping us through that. So yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you had shared with me that how you dreamed of being, you called it a missionary, but that's what a cross-cultural worker is,
Yes.
right? You
Yeah.
dreamed of that as a child. Tell us about how that all came to be, that dream. How did that come up, or how did it grab a hold of your heart so well?
Yeah, there was a dream from when I was really little, because we were still in Arizona. So that means I was younger than 10, because that's when we moved. And I read a lot of missionary biographies
Mm,
that were, I mean, written for children, shorter stories, but these people like Hudson Taylor or Gladys Aylward or Adoniram Judson, all these people. And so I started just really getting into their stories and their lives, and they became my heroes slowly
ah,
as I read about them. And so I really wanted to be like them, and I think that the Lord really used that to plant the seed in me to go. But it also fits in with my personality, which is an adventurous personality. I love trying new things, I love going new places, so it fit in with who I was naturally, and
mm,
also the seed of kind of the call that some people might say to move to a new place. So but it came from reading.
wow. Where did you
Yeah.
live in Arizona? Where in Arizona did you live?
Oh, we lived in a tiny town called Springerville.
Hmm.
5,000 people. It's right on the New Mexico border, halfway up the state, if you look at the
Oh,
map.
wow.
But yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I've not heard of that, but I lived in Arizona for a short time, and we lived in a little bitty village also. Many people who live in Arizona never heard of it. It's called Levine, but it was right outside of Phoenix. So
Oh, okay. Yeah.
that's small world.
It is a small world. That was funny.
So you had this dream of, moving and becoming like your heroes. How did you make the transition from living in America to not? Because I know you don't live in America now, but you have done many moves in that. That's quite the journey. Let unpack that whole journey for us.
Yes, I definitely have. It started when my first initial move of all the moves started when I was 19, and I had finished 1 year of college, but I was still undeclared. I didn't know what I wanted to study. I kind of went to college because it was the thing to do and there was pressure to go. So I went and I finished the first year, but I didn't have money for the second year. I didn't have a desire, none of those things. So I was talking to my older brother who lived in Kyrgyzstan at the time, and he said, well, why don't you just move over here and we can figure it out?
Why did he live over
And
there?
they were actually, they were missionaries there at the time.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So anyway, that's a whole other story. But my brother actually ended up becoming a cross-cultural worker as well. So that's his own separate journey. But anyway, and I was talking to him and I really couldn't think of a reason to say no. So I said yes. And I moved a month after that. And it was
Wow.
supposed to just be for a year that I would be there for the school year. So whatever
Mm,
that is, 10 months or 9 months. And then I would come back, and it was to take a year off and then kind of figure things out. So,
okay.
but during that time in Kyrgyzstan was my first exposure, not only to cross-cultural living, but also to what a missionary would be like, or a cross-cultural worker, what it would be like to do that. And I was living with my brother and his wife. So I had a front seat, like, yeah, I had uh, every day, all day kind of picture of what it would be. And I really realized during that time that if I was going to tell people about Jesus and that I was a Christian, that I better know really well what it meant for me personally. And I realized that even though I had grown up in the church and I had a lot of knowledge, that I really couldn't explain it to somebody who didn't have any kind of a faith background. So I wanted more training. And so that led me to go to a Bible college in Hungary, which was in Hungary at the time. It's not anymore, but it was in Hungary at the time. And it was a 2-year program. So I finished that program. And then they had an internship the year after. So I did that internship. And that's where I met my husband.
Where was your internship at?
It was also at the Bible college. So,
okay.
Yes. So it was the same place. And after you finish the program, sometimes you could stay on and do a year of working there for free, basically, is what we did. And there was some additional like classes that we had to go along with that. More practical ministry training really is what it was. So I did that, and my husband and I studied for 2 years. So he came a year after me and did the 2-year program. And we started dating, and then he started talking about how he wanted to go back to Serbia. He's Serbian, and that he wanted to plant churches in Central or South Serbia. And so really, as he was sharing those things with me, the Lord really broke my heart for Serbia. And that's kind of all that I was waiting for from the Lord, was a place to go, because I already had all the other desires to go and to live somewhere. And it's really interesting how it all fell into place, that I was really in this place of waiting and just saying, Lord, I'm willing to go, but I don't know where to go and I don't know how to go. So yeah. Yeah. So the Lord used, in my situation, he used love and a relationship to lead me there. And then we moved down after I graduated the internship and he graduated the Bible college program. We moved to northern Serbia and lived there for a year, and then moved down to Central Serbia in 2012. And we have been here ever since.
Wow. That's so cool that God did that. You went somewhere, but you didn't have to go alone.
Yeah.
You went with a partner. That's just so cool. That's so much like his heart, loving you that way, to sending someone with you to be company, to be protection, to be a prayer partner. I mean, all the different ways of support by that. That's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So moving then to Serbia and Hungary and Kyrgyzstan, what are your struggles? What did you have to overcome in all this? It just sounds like, oh, I just went and did this. It sounds like, oh, it was a piece of cake, but I know better.
Yes, definitely. It was not a piece of cake. And yes, it sounds like I'm kind of reading off a timeline. One day I did this and then I did this. So in the book that I wrote, I talk a lot about my struggles. I really tried to be honest about the things that I struggled with. And going into a new culture is a great example because it brings out all of well, for me at least, it brought out all of the internal chaos that I had. And it ended up mirroring actually the external chaos of going into a new culture and being surrounded even with a new language and becoming really lost. It actually went really deep into who I was as a person, in the sense of bringing up a lot of, I should give a concrete example because I feel like I'm being confusing. But for example, moving to another country and not in Serbian, not being able to speak Serbian, I became like a little child again. So completely dependent on other people. I couldn't do anything by myself. I could walk around by myself, but I couldn't feed myself. I couldn't go to the store and get all the ingredients to make myself lunch because maybe they didn't have the ingredients I needed, or they came in such different packaging that I wasn't actually 100% sure what I was getting. So, yes.
Did you ever buy food that you wish you wouldn't have bought?
No, like silly things. Like here, the mayonnaise is in a yellow container, so I thought it was mustard. Yeah, sour cream and yogurt are in the same container, so mix those up. It just takes a long time to figure out, what is it, a milk, but it's in a box, so is it actually milk? What's the difference? There's a red milk and a blue milk, so what's the difference between the milks? And it becomes this exhausting, frustrating thing just to buy milk or just to go to the store. So I remember, even the stove at the apartment that I lived in for the first year, the stove was so different that I didn't know how to turn the stove on. And so I had to ask my roommate. So these things that you're thinking, oh, I feel like a complete idiot. I can't even turn the stove on, to do anything. And then, or to go to the market, the farmer's market, which is where you here get your fresh fruits and vegetables, but you have to ask for everything. So I could not do that by myself. These kind of things. So, but that becoming like a small child made me realize for the first time how much I loved being independent, but to the extreme to be self-sufficient and to do it on my own, and how much that actually is not always the heart of God to be so much on our own and so individualistic. The American culture is a very individualistic culture. So we value individualism and there are values in that. But Serbia is a very collective culture, more collective than the US. So I've learned a lot about actually being interdependent is a lot closer to the biblical picture than being independent, But that was something that when it was physically stripped away from me, it forced me to do it. And then it kind of, I think the Lord used that to then speak to the spiritual aspects of that. It's like, no, this is actually better. It's actually better to ask for help. It's actually better to do things together and those kind of things. So that's one example of so many. There's so many examples. It was so hard. I cried so many tears. I don't even know. It felt like I was never going to speak the language. Danny, which is my husband, he really helped me during that time. And I'm so thankful for him because he would often just be there sitting next to me as I cried and telling me that I could do it and just cheering me on. And I had a couple other one girlfriend when we moved down to Central Serbia who was also like that. And she was a believer, which was amazing. So she also cheered me on. And I think that that was invaluable, to have those people. But it was nothing about it was easy. Nothing.
Wow. So how did you intentionally get the victory over all this self-defeating feelings? How did you get the victory and become as confident and coming across today like everything's a breeze? Because you come across that way, but you clearly went through all that difficulty. How did you go from the one to the other?
Well, I should be honest that sometimes I'm overconfident. So that's something I'm working on, but excuse me. But I do think that that I have experienced victory, and somebody gave me great advice, and I think it was my brother, but I can't exactly remember. But he told me, just do the next thing. So I've used that a lot in my life, just to do the next thing, whatever the next step is. So is it to learn the alphabet? That's the next thing. I buy an alphabet book. That's what I did. I bought the preschool book that they use, and I traced my letters with the little dots and traced them until I knew them. So that was the next thing. Okay, I know my letters. What's the next thing? To put them together to learn words. I went to lessons with somebody who helped me with that, but it kind of I think that really helped me to gain victory in the small things, to keep going, just to keep going and not to get stuck in all of the hard things. But also it was grace. I was so surrounded with the grace of the Lord that just, I think sometimes picked me up when I really thought that I couldn't. Sometimes I would feel even miraculously lifted, from this overwhelming feeling of that I couldn't do it. So I think it was the Holy Spirit in me. And I also think it was the prayers of other people. I had so many people praying for me. I had people who were in the same city that I was living in praying for me, a couple believers, and then also people who back in the States or from Bible college or wherever that were praying for me. And I noticed that the more open, and I still see that, the more open I am about my story, to share my struggles, it actually lets people in to pray for me and to pour into me more. And that is where some of my victory comes from too, is from the other people, either their prayers or their wisdom, or, a timely word that they might have for me, or any of those things. But yeah, victory is not a one-time thing in my experience. It's kind of a daily one step at a time, you know?
Yeah.
So
That's some honesty right there. Yep.
yeah. Yes.
So you have written a book or are writing a book. Tell us about, you mentioned it briefly, but it's not out yet as at this recording. I'm not sure when this will be released, but tell us about your book. Why did you write a book? What is the name of your book?
Yes, I wrote a book. It's written. So it is finished, but it's still being formatted.
That
which is
sounds very
taking-
biblical. It is written, it is
It
finished.
is written. It is finished. Yes. I say that because every time I read it, I want to go back and like mess with it. But my editor keeps saying, no, put it, you're done writing it. So I'm not going to do that. It's being formatted and it will be released in August of this year. So it is called Hard is Only Half the Story. And each chapter is a different true story from my life. So from the period of moving to Kyrgyzstan to present day. And so I picked these experiences, and the idea behind the book is to show a realistic picture of the hardships of going into something unknown, which in my case was a culture, but also what happens when we push through, I call it the hard half, to get to the other half of the things that the Lord actually had in store for us all along through the hard things, how he always uses the hard things to enrich us. So to talk about things like how I like telling jokes, I like being funny, but not being able to do that in Serbian for years, because it takes I had one joke in Serbian for years, like one joke that I could tell. That's it. So nobody knew I was funny. Nobody knew that I liked to tease or these kind of things. So that part of me was missing. But as it was missing, I realized how much I use my humor to hide behind sometimes, or to maybe attack somebody else, if I'm really honest, or to cut through, but not in a nice way. I mean, to like cut off their head. Sometimes, these like that I'm so quick that it actually was grace that I had to be slow in a second language so that I could actually think about what I was saying. And I could only say it one way. I didn't have all these options of, I could say it like this, I could be snarky, I could be, no, it was like one way. I am sad, I am happy. That's how you talk when you are learning a new language. So you can't do that. But I actually think that my humor now is a lot better and more pure than before, because it went through this process, of being taken all apart and then put back together with God. That's always a good process, because he always puts back together, much better than how we had either put ourselves together or circumstances or whatever. So that's just a silly example, but the book is really about that, how I was taken all apart, going into the unknown, and then how the Lord put me back together into a better version of myself, really. So
that's awesome. What is something that you really love about what you do?
Oh, that's a good question. I am going through a transition right now, so it's hard to answer. Writing is a new venture for me. So this book is a new venture, and I hope to pursue my writing with in the future with more of my time, to give more of my time to writing. And also that community garden that I mentioned is also a new venture. So I feel like I'm moving into these new things, but I'm in this weird like in between of I'm not actually doing either of them as much as I plan to in the next few months, or in the future. So I actually don't know how to answer that question. There's a lot of things I enjoy about life here. I've been home with our 4.5-year-old son for 4.5 years, but sorry, since he was born, and he just started preschool. So that was a transition. So a lot of my life was really different. COVID really changed our lives, I'm sure, for everybody who's listening to this, but that changed a lot of the things that we did. Everything that we did with a group of people. We had a respite care ministry to adults and parents who have children with autism. That stopped. I taught English to kids. That stopped. Everything that we did stopped because of COVID, and none of it started up again, which is really interesting. Yeah. So it's a transition for me and for Danny, my husband too, of trying to figure out what the Lord has for us and trying to wait for his voice and not to run ahead of him, but to go. So I really feel like the garden and writing are two of those things, but I'm not actually doing them yet. So I think I'll enjoy them.
Well, it sounded like the garden is a enjoyable thing because you're doing it,
Yes.
even though you said that you're a novice at it and you have someone
Yeah.
helping you. So it sounds like
Yes.
you're in anticipation of that joy.
Yes. Yes, that is true. I did plant a garden 2 years ago with somebody who was helping me, and I was kind of like a helper. So I do have a little bit of experience. I know I will enjoy that. Yeah. Yeah.
All righty. Well, what is something that you want to share with our audience that you want to make sure that they hear from you today?
I think that if I had to narrow it down, it would be that when the unknown is right in front of us, which I think probably all of us could pick something that is unknown in our life or feels uncertain, that with the Lord, it really is worth it to go into it and to be brave and all the way. I'm talking jump into it 100%, put yourself into it and know that the Lord is right beside you and that he already knows the way and that he promises never to leave us. And that at the end, if you allow the Lord to change you, which that's for me too, to keep changing me and to change us, that we actually do become healthier people and we do become better versions of ourselves with the Lord. That's his goal. And that is really what we want. And I think parts of us are really desperate for change. So sometimes the unknown is that avenue of, being freed from some of those things that we actually want to get rid of, but don't know how. So, but mostly that the Lord is always with us and he's so patient. He's way more patient than we'll ever be with each other. And he'll do the process till it's done, until we're completely healthy, which that will happen when Jesus comes back. But we'll be in the process the whole way and hopefully be getting healthier and healthier.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you for sharing your journey into the unknown, braving into the unknown with us, and just the courage and the encouragement to continue to go forward. So how can people connect with you if they want to follow your journeys or know more about when your book comes out? How can people connect with you?
Yeah, right now the best way would be social media, because my website is still under construction. It's also taking longer than I anticipated, but I'm trying to be patient. So, but that will be, I'll put a link on my Facebook and my Instagram, which is just my first and my last name. So my last name's a little tricky. Maybe that will be in the show notes.
Yes, it
How
will.
do you spell Zahorjanski? So yes, but I think, it's easy to find me because of my last name, Wendy Zahorjanski. And my website actually will just be my first and last name.com when it's finished. So, and it should be up, I think, when this airs, because it should be up in the next couple weeks. So I'm hoping.
And it'll be up before this airs then.
Oh, that would be good. That would be best case scenario.
Awesome.
So that's the best way right now.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for being with us today, Wendy. And thank you, audience, for being with us, listening to this story and going on this journey with us. And so until next time, I love you.